Welcome to Switch. My name is Jeremy McCarter, and like I said last week, we are going to be best friends. And since we're best friends, I have a story that I need to tell you. Now, this story goes back a little ways. It goes back to 1977. Yeah, a long, long time ago. This was the year that I was born. Now, as you know, the 70s was known as the disco generation, which may explain. What's up? For those who were here last week, you may remember the vibe. Well, my dad discovered the vibe sooner in life than I did. You see, at the age of 17, my dad had a summer fling with my mom, who was 16 at the time. And to make a long story short, they did a little dance, made a little love, got down tonight. And I was conceived. Now, I'll be honest, it's awkward to sort of talk about your parents getting it on. It's sort of like, oh, that's gross. Okay, I'm just going to, so don't do that. I'm not going to do that again. But, so my parents decide that they're going to get married. And 7 months pregnant, my mom crawls out her bedroom window with all of her things. Here's the thing, her family was so disconnected that nobody knew she was pregnant. Now, how do you not know that somebody's 7 months pregnant? I don't know. But she goes out the window, she hands all her stuff to my dad, they load it into a car, they drive down to the courthouse, they get married, and they begin to start this new chapter in their life with this unplanned baby on the way with very little money. And several months later, I made my grand entrance into this world. And my parents were so happy. That was the beginning of my story. And you have a beginning to your story too. Now, some of you are an answer to prayer. Your parents were prepared. They were ready. When you came into this world, there was a crib that matched the paint on the walls, that matched the pictures down the hall. And your parents were so excited about you that they took literally hundreds of pictures of you as a baby. That was your beginning. For others, you came into the story and it didn't really look like that. It really wasn't this grand entrance. The pictures were sort of non-existent. And when you came into the world, you know what, maybe a parent decided to skip out on the event. Maybe they've skipped out on your entire life. I have friends who came into their story sort of began with them being born and their biological mom saying, here you go, and handed them to another family member to raise, or handed them to a family that was going to adopt them. That's how their story began. We all have a beginning to our story. Some of our stories began in a hospital. Some of our stories began in a home. Some of them began in random places like a car or a swimming pool. Some of you may have been born in a barn. Have your parents ever said that? My mom used to say that all the time. My mom would be like, close the door, were you born in the barn? To which my response would be, I don't know, Mom, are you a cow? No, I never said that. If I would have said that, I would not be on the stage right now. My mom would have choked me out and killed me, okay? So don't ever say that to your parents. But we all have sort of a beginning to our story. And as we jump in tonight, I want you to grab your Bible. I want you to grab whatever kind of device you can get that will take you to YouVersion. We are going to be in Genesis 1:1, the beginning of the story. Now, it'll take us a couple minutes to get there. Before we do, let's recap where we went last week. If you were here last week, we kicked off a series called Epic. And we said this series is all about story. And you may remember we zoomed in on our lives. And we got really close. And we asked the question, what's the story you want to tell? And then we challenge you to live this life the way you want to tell it. This week, we're going to do something different. Instead of zooming in on us, we're going to zoom out. We're going to pan out. We're going to adjust the lens, and we're going to look at the bigger picture. Now, when I say the bigger picture, let me tell you what I visualize in my mind so it'll help us all. I picture the thing you see when you go into the mall or when you go to a theme park or when you go to the zoo that is like the big map of everything. So if you go to the mall, there's this big picture, and when you look at it, it has all the stores in the mall. And they're in all these different categories. And sometimes they're color-coded, and they're great. That's the big picture. And when you look at the big picture, you don't look into the big picture and say, okay, now where am I? Because you're already on that map. Sometimes you're a circle. Sometimes you're a star. Because right next to it says, you are here. Once again, nobody walks up to the big picture looking for themselves. I've never walked up and been like, all right, where am I? Found me. Woo, here I am. Thank you. I've been looking all over the mall for myself. Thank you, big picture. We don't do that. Here's what the big picture does. The big picture shows us where we are in comparison to everything else. It shows us where we are, and it gives us direction to where we want to be. It gives us our bearings. It shows us the big picture. And tonight, I want us to look at the big picture. I want to look at God's story. So we're going to start at the most obvious place. We're going to start at the beginning. Now, most epic stories begin with once upon a time. Or sometimes it'll say something like a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. But our story starts in the beginning. Genesis chapter 1. We'll start reading. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's pretty simple. So if we were just to look at this right here and come to some conclusions, here's what I can tell you. This tells me that God is the main character in the story. This tells me that God is directing the story. This tells me that God is writing the script and he's creating the set for a story. This tells me that when I get to the end, that when there's a glory, when there's praise, when there's a recognition for a great story, that this is God's story. That is, if I start here. When I was in elementary school, there was a movie that came out that all of my friends loved. It was a movie called The Princess Bride. Now, if you've never seen it, it's about this grandpa reading a story to his grandson, and there's all kinds of different things that go into the story. Now, my friends, they quoted it, they memorized it, they talked about it all the time, and from everything I knew, it was an epic story. And when I finally got a VHS tape, which I know most of you don't know what that is, but when I got my VHS tape that my friend recorded the movie off of HBO, I couldn't wait to watch it. So when I pushed play, I quickly realized that my friend was a little bit slow on the trigger because the beginning of the movie wasn't there. And so I just sort of picked up where it was at. And I thought, no big deal. I can figure this all out. But as I watched it with high expectations, when it got to the end, I wasn't that impressed. The characters were hokey, the storyline was dumb. I just didn't really get it. Now then, I didn't know why. But now I do. You see, fast forward 25 years, I see this movie, The Princess Bride, is going to be on TV, and I record it for my boys. And even though I know it's a dumb movie, and even though I know that I wouldn't want to watch it again because I want to be Father of the Year, I watch it with my boys. But I have a different reaction this time. I love it. I like the movie. What was the difference? I'll tell you the difference. I saw the beginning. You see, the first time I thought I missed the first 10 minutes. But I'd missed the first 45 minutes. And so the whole story didn't make sense. But now this time it did. I understood who the characters were. I understood what the characters wanted. I understand why they were doing what they're doing, and I begin to want the same things for them. I wanted Wesley to get Buttercup. I wanted Ignacio Montoya to destroy and to get revenge for his father. I wanted Andre the Giant to be my best friend. Once again, what was the difference? I saw the whole picture. I saw the big picture. I caught the beginning. What would happen if we believed that this, what we read just a second ago, if we believed that this was the beginning of our story? That in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. How would your story be different? Here's probably one conclusion we can come to. Our big story, this big life that we're living, would look like a really small chapter in God's big epic story. So let me tell you a little bit about God's story. If we start here, we're to go on. For the next 6 days, God begins to create things. He starts to create the set for the story he wants to tell. And some of you know the creation story, but let me sort of paraphrase it. God's going to sort of create the backdrop. He's going to get the lights. He's going to get everything set up. He's going to cast the character. He's going to get the stage ready. And then he casts his 2 first characters, Adam and Eve. Yep. Here we go. We're going to pick up our story, Genesis chapter 3. If you have a Bible, turn over to Genesis chapter 3. Stage is set. God's ready to tell the story. And once again, as we tell the story this time, I want you to look back and say, hey, could it be that this is my story, that my story starts here, that instead of picking up in the middle of the story where I enter into the story, I'm going to go back to the beginning and say, all right, where does God start the story? Here we go. The serpent was the shrewdest of all the wild animals the Lord God had made. Here, let me tell you what just happened in the story. The villain, evil, just entered into the story. The bad guy's here. Now, why does all stories have a bad guy? Think about it. All stories do. Help me out here. Help me out. In Little Red Riding Hood, there is the big bad wolf. Good. In The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy's nemesis is the witch. Yeah, the Wicked Witch of the West. If you watch Star Wars, the bad guy's name is Darth Vader. Some nerd said Darth Maul, and that's true too. Both answers are correct. In Dark Knight, okay, there's a guy who paints his face, and his name is the Joker. Yeah, and so you have these bad guys. In the movie The Twilight, you have these bad guys who come and try and take out the Cullen family, and their name is the... Girls, I was expecting a lot more out of you. The Voltron, they come. Yeah, they're trying to take them out. I told you last week I like vampire movies. All right. But every story has a villain. Why does every story have a villain? Catch this. Why does every story have a villain? Because our story has a villain. Once again, this serpent entered into the story. There's a bad guy in your story. There's a person trying to take you out in your story. There's a person that, you know what, if you look at your story, you may have some pain right now. Somebody has caused you pain. You know why that is? Because there's an enemy in your story. Some of you have felt abandoned. You know why that is? There's an enemy in your story. Some of you feel regret. Some of you feel shame. Some of you just, you feel like you can't win in life, and there's a voice that tells you you're not good enough. Do you know why that is? There's an enemy in your life. And the enemy, the Bible says, wants to steal. He wants to kill. He wants to destroy us. He wants to mess up your story. Listen to what happens with Eve. He goes, one day, he, the serpent, asked the woman, did God really say you must not eat the fruit from any of the trees in the garden? So right here, he's trying to sort of throw things off. See, God did give them a rule. And God's rule was, you can eat from any tree in the garden, just don't eat from this one. And the reason God did that was not to be mean or to be rude, but he wanted to give people free choice. He wanted to give us all free will, the ability to choose between right and wrong. And if everything's right, then you can't choose wrong. So God says, hey, don't eat this one. So Eve responds correctly. Of course, we may eat from the trees in the garden. It's only the fruit from the tree in the middle of the garden that we are not allowed to eat, which is all correct. She said, God said, you must not eat it or even touch it. If you do, you will die. To which the enemy takes and he starts to twist this, and he starts to corrupt it, and he tries to mess up the story. Listen to what he says. He says, you won't die. God is such a drama queen. You're not going to die. That's made up. That's exaggerated. God knows that your eyes will be opened as soon as you eat it, and you will be like God, knowing both good and evil. Really, Eve? It's no big deal. God is holding out on you. Eve, I know you don't get this right now, but here's the thing you got to understand. God doesn't want you to be like him, and if you were to do this, you're going to be like him. If you were to eat that apple, you would get the life you wanted. You can get out of this lame garden, get away from these lame rules, and go live this life the way you want to live it. You can go and say, YOLO, this is my story. You're going to have a great time. You're going to have a story that matters, that people want to listen to, Eve, and all you have to do is take a bite of that apple. Hey, here's the thing. If God's so good, why won't he let you eat it anyways? Come on. God's exaggerating all this. What did he do? He tried to make the good guy. He tried to make God look like the bad guy. The story says, the woman was convinced. When I was little, I was into WWF wrestling, which has now become WWE wrestling. So people like Hulk Hogan, Junkyard Dog, Randy Macho Man Savage, Ultimate Warriors, those were my heroes. And I was convinced that it was real. And so when friends or family would tell me, well, Jeremy, you know that's not real, I would go with the eight-year-old comeback, it's too. It's real. It's really real. Yeah, it's real. And they'd be like, no, it's not. No, it's serious. You want me to body slam you, show you it's real? Ooh, yeah, Macho Man. You know, I was intense. I was convinced. And I would fight. I would argue over it. And here you see that Eve is convinced. And it goes on. Of course, it says, the woman was convinced. She saw the tree was beautiful and its fruits looked delicious. And she wanted the wisdom it would give her. So she took some of the fruit and ate it. And then she gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it too. Adam and Eve were convinced. And in the blink of an eye, the story that's only a couple chapters old, just a few words old, just a few pages long, it takes a hit. The story's going to be, it seems that it's going to be messed up and ruined forever. But here's the deal. I think if we were to go back and talk to Adam and talk to Eve and say, why did you do that? Why did you bite that apple? Why did you break the rule? I don't think they would say, well, we just wanted to mess up our lives. I don't think that would be their answer. I don't think they would say, well, we didn't think God could be trusted. I don't think that would be their answer. I think it would be something along these lines. I think they would say, we were convinced that it wasn't a big deal. I've been there. You know what, in my life, I look around, there's certain things that I've convinced myself are not a big deal. I've convinced myself that, hey, it's okay to cheat as long as I don't get caught. It's not a big deal. Hey, it's okay to cuss if it means that people will accept me and they'll laugh at my funny jokes. It's okay to put other people down or to make fun of other people if it means that I can feel better about myself or if I can look better in front of other people. It's okay to look at certain things I know I shouldn't look at or to do certain things I know I shouldn't do as long as it feels good and it hurts nobody else. But if you were to ask me, Jeremy, do you think those things are wrong? I'd say, yeah, I think those things are wrong. But it's just not a big deal, right? But it is a big deal. You see, we all have stories where we did those things that were no big deal and they've messed up our story. We've been left with regret. We've been left with shame. And Adam and Eve's story, I'm not going to read the rest of it tonight, but you're going to find those kinds of things that are hiding from God. In a story that God took all this time to set up and all this energy to build out and prepare for, all of a sudden, the story seems ruined. And the reason I say seemed ruined is God wasn't just telling a good story. God was telling an epic story. And this is just the beginning of the story he wants to tell. Think about it. Every epic movie, every fairy tale, every myth, how does it begin? Things were once good, and then something awful happens, right? Things are really good, and then all of a sudden something really bad happens, and a battle must be fought, or a journey must be taken. And at just the right moment, which seems like the last possible moment, a hero comes in and he sets things right. And life is found again. That's why movies like Gladiator, that's why movies like Braveheart, The Dark Knight, Cinderella, all those movies that are sort of epic to us, do you know why those resonate inside our hearts? You know why when we watch those movies, we think, I want to be like that. This moves me. This inspires me. That's the kind of story I want to have. Because this is the story God has put in all of our hearts. You see, those stories, just like our story, is derived from a bigger story. There's a bigger story. And it's bigger than your story. It's bigger than my story. And right now I know some of you are here, and your story is actually a good story. Maybe you just made the team. Maybe you just made the band. Whatever, you've done something really good and life's going good. There's still a bigger story. Some of you got the grade you wanted. You got the score on your ACT you wanted. And now you can go to the colleges you've been wanting to go to. There's a bigger story. There's some of you, man, family life is going good. You got the guy or you got the girl. You have a great relationship going. And everything is looking good. Remember, there's a bigger story. But there's another group of us. And we look at our story and we're not so happy with it. We don't like our story. And I'll tell you the same thing. Don't forget, there's a bigger story. For some of you right now, you're ashamed of some of the things you've done. And you're blaming God. You're saying, hey, God, this is all your fault. No, don't forget, there's a bigger story. There's some of us who, we think the world revolves around us. And this is all about me. There's a bigger story. And for tonight, my question for you, my thought for you is, whose story are you telling? Your story or God's story? You see, he has invited us into a bigger story. Do you start at the beginning of the movie, or do you start with you? There's a bigger story.
We have been separated. Deceived by evil and alienated from perfection. We are the focus of a serpent. His ambition is to lead us astray from the truth, further separating us from our author. Lies are presented like the fruit of Eden, handed on a silver platter with a smile of betrayal. We grip these lies due to ignorance. Lies of power, lies of glory, further leading us to death. But grace is sufficient. And with the death of your story begins the tale of God's glory.